Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever really thought about how an idea, maybe just a small one inside a huge company, turns into something massive, like a product that leads the market? And then what happens to the whole industry afterwards? Today, we're digging into your sources, taking a deep dive into, well, innovation, market strategy, and how industries kind of grow up and change.
Yeah, our mission here is really to pull out the key stuff from the material you've shared. We want to give you a clear picture of how new things get developed, how they actually get to the market, and then what happens as those markets mature. We'll look inside companies, at what sparks creativity, but also outside at the big forces shaping whole industries.
Okay, let's get into it then. When we think innovation, maybe we picture like a lone genius in a garage, right? But your sources talk about how these giant corporations try to keep that spark alive. We meet Enrique Sanchez. He's heading up new product development at a big consumer goods place. And his big challenge is exactly that. How do you foster creativity, actual innovation, without getting bogged down in, bureaucracy and endless meetings?
It's a classic problem, really. And what's interesting in the sources is seeing the specific strategies they use to try and stay, well, agile. Two main ideas pop out: corporate venturing and entrepreneurship. These are basically ways to get employees thinking and acting like entrepreneurs, but inside the big company structure.
Right, that entrepreneurship idea. It's not just talk. Enrique's company actually lets people spend, 15% of their time on their own projects, completely separate from their normal jobs. And then you have skunk works, which sounds kind of cool. These are like dedicated innovation teams set up physically away from headquarters, working outside the normal chain of command.
Exactly. And the classic example, the one everyone knows, is IBM and its first PC. That came out of a skunk works setup, deliberately separate from their main R&D. It really suggests that sometimes, the best way to get something truly new off the ground, even in a giant company, is to create this small, fast, almost independent unit.
Like a little speedboat launched from the giant tanker. Okay, and this connects to something pretty fundamental your sources state, that companies really only do two basic things, is that right? Innovation, making new stuff, and marketing it, selling it.
It sounds simple, maybe too simple, but it's powerful. Innovation and marketing, that's the core. And the sources stress how involved marketing needs to be right from the get-go, not just, figuring out ads at the end. They're in there heavily involved, it says, at the very early stages of product development.
Which makes sense. You need to know if anyone will actually want the thing you're innovating. How do they do that early on?
Well, a key tool mentioned is focus groups. Getting reactions from actual consumers, potential buyers, giving their opinions on the product concept, maybe even early versions. This feedback loop right at the start is just vital. It helps make sure the innovation isn't just clever, but actually meets a need or creates one people didn't know they had.
Okay, so you got this potential product. It survived the internal hurdles, got good feedback. Now what? The next big question is when to launch it. And your sources lay out this classic choice. Do you go first? Be the pioneer? Or do you hang back, let someone else test the waters, and be a follower?
Yeah, this is the first mover advantage idea. Companies that launch first are called trendsetters, innovators. And the big advantage, they can influence the way the market develops. They get to set some of the rules, define the category maybe in the minds of consumers. That's huge.
It's like planting your flag first, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You build that brand association people think of you when they think of that product type. And you grab market share while competitors are still scrambling.
Definitely powerful. But, and this is a big but, the sources also present the flip side. The argument that it's better to be a follower and learn from the mistakes of the pioneers. Let the first mover spend all the money educating the market, work out the kinks in the technology or service.
And then you swoop in.
Sort of, yeah. You come in potentially with a better product, lower cost maybe, because you saw what worked and what didn't. You avoid those expensive early mistakes. It's a more cautious strategy.
So really boils down to a strategic bet, doesn't it? Risk versus reward. Shaping the market versus optimizing based on what you see. Two totally different ways to play the game.
Absolutely. And there's no single right answer. It depends so much on the company, the market, everything. But let's say a product does launch, pioneer or follower, and it takes off. It creates a whole new industry. What happens next? Because industries themselves evolve, right?
Yeah, the sources describe a kind of life cycle for industries. It's not just static.
Exactly. So a new or emerging industry, especially one based on new tech, starts off looking very attractive. Lots of buzz, lots of potential. At this early stage, the future structure of the industry is not yet established. That's key. It means there's room for many competitors. It's like a gold rush almost, wide open.
You can picture it, right? Loads of startups, different ideas flying around, everyone trying to grab a piece of the action. High energy, maybe a bit chaotic. But your sources say that phase doesn't last forever.
No, it usually doesn't. What typically happens is eventually the growth in the new market slows. It can't grow exponentially forever. And as that happens, the pressure ramps up. Smaller companies, maybe the ones with higher costs because they haven't scaled up, they start to struggle. They can no longer compete effectively on price or features or whatever it might be.
So the weaker players get squeezed out.
Pretty much. This leads to what the sources call shakeout and consolidation. It sounds dramatic, and it often is. Those smaller, struggling firms either just drop out, go bust, or they are bought by the larger companies. Mergers and acquisitions time.
Ah, okay, so the field narrows.
Right. The competition gets intense, and the stronger players consolidate their positions, buying up rivals or assets. And the end result of this whole shakeout process, it leaves the larger companies with the resources to dominate the industry, which is now mature.
So you go from this wide-open, dynamic, maybe messy beginning
Yeah, full of potential competitors.
to a much more stable, concentrated market dominated by just a few big players.
That's the fundamental cycle described. From emerging and attractive to mature and consolidated, it's a pattern seen over and over again.
Wow. Okay, so we've gone from, like, the internal spark of an idea, entrepreneurs, skunk works, through that big strategic choice, pioneer or follower, and ended up watching the whole industry evolve through shakeout and consolidation. It's quite a journey.
It really is. And I think what's really striking is how interconnected it all is. You know, how a company decides to foster innovation inside its walls directly impacts its choices about when and how to enter a market. And those choices, in turn, influence and are influenced by these bigger industry evolution cycles. It's all linked.
So next time you see a hot new product or hear about a new tech trend, it's worth thinking, maybe, about what's going on behind the scenes. How did that idea start inside the company? Are they playing a pioneer game, or are they letting others go first? And looking at the broader industry, where is it in that cycle? Is the shakeout starting, or is it already mature?
Yeah, exactly. And maybe the question for you listening is this: how does understanding these dynamics, the internal innovation, the market entry strategies, the industry cycles, change how you see the businesses around you? Whether you're just buying their products or maybe thinking about investing or even dreaming up your own innovation, something to think about.